The Zim's Velocity, a satire of small-town ambition and bureaucracy. Part 1, The Head of the Clan and the Cult of Slow Living. The sun rose early, casting a pale, clean light that spread over the moss-covered rooftops of Vanshaw Hamlet, signaling a perfect autumn day. After carefully pumping the tires of my old bicycle in what I call the low-energy tire pump style, a grandiose term for a poor man's attempt to conserve every last breath of effort, I decided to take a mini tour around the village. The trip had two distinct goals. First, to visit the cultural sites, the ancient banyan trees and water wells that had witnessed generations of change, and second, to stop by the newly opened savory porridge stall run by Madame Lai. To say I was saving energy was just a fancy excuse. In reality, I was too lazy to cook and planned to devour 2 bowls of savory porridge for lunch. It was a golden opportunity, as Madame Lai was running the buy one, get one free promotion. 2 full bowls for the price of 1. That's a hell of a profit margin. In this era of inflation, optimizing my stomach capacity with minimal cost is a form of happiness in itself. It had been a long time since I quit the motorcycle taxi business. Today, I was finally enjoying the feeling of slow living, much like the residents of Scandinavian countries, who often commute by bus or bike. I've heard that when people are truly affluent, they prioritize quality over showing off big houses and luxury cars, unlike most folks here in Vanshaw. For now, since I wasn't flooded and wasn't stuck in traffic, as one local official once declared, that in itself is happiness, I told myself, I certainly couldn't claim to be a cycling pioneer. Kids 4 or 5 years old were already zipping through the village streets on 2-wheelers with training wheels. I'd heard that Mrs. Elder May, a local figure of importance, intended to start career guidance from kindergarten. Apparently, Van XAS kids were being primed for 4-wheeled careers, taxi drivers, or maybe bus operators for a 24-seat vehicle. The grown-up stream of social advancement was being passed down through every turn of a bicycle wheel. Lost in the autumn sun and breeze, I suddenly hit the brakes hard. The tires screeched on the pavement. Patriarch Lo Lo appeared directly ahead of me. The patriarch was an oddity. Wealthy and well-traveled, in his 60s he had rediscovered a flame of naive romanticism. He wore traditional silk garb and carried a bird cage like some pampered young nobleman, but his eyes held the curiosity and excitement of a child discovering a new toy. Surprised to see me on a bicycle, he immediately asked, his voice ringing like a village bell, "Where's your motorbike? Why are you trudging along on a bicycle today?" Reporting, uncle, I quickly replied, seizing the chance to spin a contemporary tale that elevated my old scooter. My Zim crossed a puddle and got hydro-locked. It needs oil and a spark plug replacement, a whole fuss. So, since the weather is nice, I invite you for a mini tour around the village to boost tourism and live green and clean without polluting the environment. Honestly, I just picked up on the common news of car hydro-locking to elevate the status of my bicycle. Seeing the patriarch free and in good spirits, I invited him onto the back of the bike. It's not every day you get to live green and clean. Patriarch Lo Lo laughed heartily, reverently placed his bird cage in my bike basket, and hopped onto the back seat. His first action was to propose an informal treaty. This miniature must be perfect. We agree, no discussing negative current events, no hot gossip from the internet. We'll stop at every snack stall, and the final destination is Madame Lai's porridge stall. If we stray, we might end up mouths agape because we're late. I nodded eagerly. Not discussing negative news felt like a huge relief, like shedding the weight of the universe. As we slowly cycled past the tree-lined road, the patriarch settled down and began to confide in me. Every day I write a few poems and short stories. I intend to be the first in my clan to publish a book and join the Venshaw Literary Arts Association. I knew he was earnest but utterly naive. Literature, to him, was a gateway to fame and refinement. But to those who'd witnessed the local literary circle in action, it was just a pit of jealousy and slander. I couldn't resist giving him some honest advice, my voice low with warning. "Uncle, you can fraternize with any woman in the village, but don't fraternize with the literary circle." The patriarch turned back, surprised. "Why would you say that? Literature is like a guiding torch." "Not at all," I sighed. "One poetess recently remarked that those writers only slander and undermine each other. Why get involved? You've trod in cow dung countless times and didn't mind, but stepping into that circle could ruin your reputation." The patriarch pondered this, a crease forming on his forehead. But after a moment, he laughed and waved his hand. "Let me be. I must indulge my wandering spirit." We stopped at the village water station. While the patriarch went to the bushes to relieve himself, I sipped hot tea. Naturally, I didn't dare gossip about global events. Sticking to the treaty, I focused on culture and education to match the patriarch's refinement. I waited for him to finish his hookah and cough violently like a 70-year-old, then began. That child prodigy didn't get any votes because they were being greedy. It would be better to send the money used for voting to aid disaster victims. I think, Uncle, instead of printing that poetry collection, it'd be more practical to donate the money to flood victims. The patriarch, contemplating the suggestion, finally conceded. "I understand. All along, you just want me to stick to the ancestral hall." "I wouldn't dare," I demurred. "I just don't want you to stress over the clan's reputation. Who knows, maybe you'll win the Scabby's prize. Who am I to crush dreams?" Realizing that specializing in one skill leads to honor was always true, I decided to return to my taxi business once my old Zim was ready. After the appetizer of tea, I stretched and invited the patriarch back onto the bike. The next stop was Madame Mao's mooncake stall. Seeing his surprise, I explained. "It's past the Mid-Autumn Festival, so the cakes are deeply discounted by one, get to free. This miniature is going to be incredibly filling, and the cost will only be equal to one motorbike taxi fare." I shared Madame Mao's business model. She imported fillings from across the border early in the year, froze them, and produced cakes until the 20th day of the 8th lunar month. The unsold cakes would be donated to remote areas as charity. She recouped her costs and profits while gaining a reputation for benevolence. It was a model of profit optimization through charity. The patriarch's dream of buying a house in Hanoi still lingered. He asked about my scooter's hydro-lock issue. "The roads have been clear for ages. How did it get hydro-locked?" Tired of talking, I told him to look up pictures of Fudu Noodle Village and Munor Village online. Those places flood terribly. Tamo Village is different, I mentioned. They caught the adjacent urban area pumping water into their village. That's how it became a whole mess. I pointed out that Hanoi, after being hit by recurring storms the Old Hammer and Moon Face, had spawned thousands of self-proclaimed flood control experts, each with thousands of followers. Too many cooks spoil the broth, I noted. The officials talk a lot, but nothing gets done. Over our savory porridge bowls, we were only charged for one. The patriarch confided, "I want to buy a house in Hanoi so my grandson can get a good education. The schooling here isn't bad," I countered, "and you don't have to worry about school zoning. If I follow your advice, Hanoi houses should cost only 20 million dong per square meter," he sighed. "They inflate the prices too much. I suppose I'll only visit twice a month once the prices drop." Sticking to our theme of culture and education, I agreed, praising Hanoi for its concentration of talented teachers. I added chili flakes to my steaming porridge and contributed a hot topic. There was a teacher in Dak Lak who hit students and choked a colleague. I don't know why the education sector hasn't fired him and hired a new teacher. The patriarch was shocked. "If he hit my grandson, I'd feed him ribs instead of rice." "It varies," I said. One student raised their hand but wasn't called on, so they bit their own arm and told their mother the teacher hit them. Kids are so different now. Yes, now they have a trend of worshipping Kong. Which god is Kong? Is it related to learning? It's just a Thai doll that looks like a demon. I don't know why many kids are obsessed. Referencing the recent devastating floods, I suggested the patriarch hold a village meeting to propose building an airy community hall. The old women could practice fan dancing on the first floor, and the men could play to Tom, a traditional card game, on the second. Crucially, each commune should invest in a dozen tin boats for emergencies. If the village floods up to the roof, anyone without a second floor can take temporary shelter upstairs. A win-win situation. The patriarch was enthusiastic. "My clan is the largest. We'll buy 2 tin boats and keep them by the ancestral hall to protect the ancestral tablets from flooding." I boasted about Hanoi building an oyster opera house on the West Lake, comparable to Sydney's Opera House. The patriarch joked, "If Nguyen Dinthi Street floods, will the city residents row boats to the show?" I'm not sure, but the residents of my Din Bay might find taking a speedboat amusing. Why not handle the flood control first? The opera house money is a lot. I shook my head. The person funding the opera house has no connection to the one funding the flood control, uncle. I see. It's like one official paves the road, and another digs it up to bury cables. Exactly. I understand the situation roughly like that. Part 2. The Bubble of Real Estate and the Tin Boat Rebellion. The patriarch's failed dream of buying land in Hanoi was quickly repurposed into the Tin Boat project. He saw the sheer practicality of this idea, a stark contrast to his naive literature dreams. However, when we presented the tin boat proposal to the village council, led by Chief Vanaman, famous for being bureaucratic and conservative, it was immediately rejected. Chief Van pounded the table. "Patriarch Lo Lo, are you trying to cause trouble? Van Xe has been recognized as a new cultural village. There is absolutely no flooding severe enough to require tin boats. Your proposal is negative and undermines our achievement scores. How can we report this to the superiors?" "Too many cooks spoil the broth," I interjected heatedly. "You say there's no flooding, but the rain still reaches our knees. If you can't control the floods, you must live with them. That's practical science." Chief Van glared at me. "You young motorcycle taxi insolent." Silence. This is a standing council meeting. The patriarch held my arm, his calmness a stark lesson learned from our mini tour. "I'm not writing poetry anymore. I'm doing a community project," the patriarch said calmly. "If the council won't approve it, I will self-fund. I will use my 2 tin boats to deliver aid to the most flooded families in the next rainstorm. I will record a video and post it online." just to see how the reputation of this new cultural village is affected when villagers swim in the sewage, while the ancestral hall remains safely afloat on a tin boat. This was a direct threat using media. The patriarch's words were no longer naive poetry, but a strategic shot aimed at bureaucratic credibility. The conflict was now a war of public opinion versus official achievement records. We left the council meeting to scattered applause from young dissenters. I drove the patriarch back to his ancestral hall. The conflict had drained both of us. See, young man, the patriarch, though tired, now had the cunning gaze of a strategist. They won't let this go easily. We're about to be hit with a slander lawsuit for undermining achievements. Let them sue. Specializing in one skill leads to honor, I laughed. I'll be the MC for your tin boat fundraiser, and we'll use the money to hire a lawyer. The patriarch patted my shoulder. I understand. Go fix your Zim. This battle requires velocity. Part 3, Zim's velocity and the media campaign. The impending tin boat crisis forced me and the patriarch into a direct confrontation with Chief Vin's bureaucracy. To counter the slander lawsuit threat, we needed velocity for the media campaign and funds for legal fees and boats. The next morning, I took my old Zim to Old Man 6, a mechanic with excellent skills but a temper famous for saying, "A broken engine is less scary than a broken heart." When I fabricated the hydrolock story, Old Man 6 laughed, throwing down a wrench. Hydrolock? You're just lazy to change the spark plug and oil. It's just a few tens of thousands of dong. Stop making up stories about fancy cars. I scratched my head, realizing specializing in one skill leads to honor was true even here. I asked him to maximize the velocity of the Zim. I need it to run faster than the rumors. Money is no object. Uncle Lo Lo says the community campaign demands speed. Old Man 6 understood. He shook his head. A literary man and a motorcycle taxi driver combined? That's bizarre. I'll give you the velocity to outrun the sluggishness of those chief vans. Within a morning, the Zim was reborn, its engine purring, ready to carry documents and video equipment. The Zim's velocity represented the flexibility and efficiency that Venexe lacked. We held the miniature launch, floating cakes and rolling balls event at Madame Mao's stall. Madame Mao, after calculating the net profit, sponsored 100 stale mooncakes, getting her involuntary charity brand advertised. As the MC, I leveraged my online marketing skills and the language of an influencer to turn the poetry launch into a sarcastic fundraiser. The welcome table featured tiny tin boat models next to a banner "Buy cake, build boat, beat flood, save achievements." Into the microphone, I mixed humor and provocation. Today, we're not just eating 10,000 dong mix snap cakes. Buy one get to free, we're buying a life insurance policy for the entire village. Every cake contributes 2,000 dong to the Van Shaw Tin Boat Fund. Patriarch Lo Lo, in his vest, took the stage. Instead of reading flowery poetry, he recited a satirical poem I'd helped him polish. It mocked the achievement-obsessed official who, every time it rained, was reduced to yelling at people to bail water by hand while the water reached their knees. The poem ended, "Achievements tower over human heads, the cultural hall is new, yet rain floods our homes. Ask the great official, so grand, why not buy a boat for us to float along?" The poem was an instant media sensation. Villagers roared with laughter, a laughter tinged with the bitterness of truth. I immediately live-streamed the confrontation that followed. At 2 p.m., Chief Van, red-faced, arrived with police and village officials. brandishing a fundraiser suspension order for causing public alarm and damaging the aesthetics of the new cultural village. The Patriarch calmly faced him. "We are only doing charity to save lives. If you sue, go ahead. But you must explain to social media and the village youth why you are suspending the purchase of rescue boats." I pointed the microphone at Chief Van. "Chief Van, you say Vanshaw isn't flooding. If a major storm hits today and a child or elderly person is swept away, who is responsible? Can your achievement score be traded for a human life?" The chief choked on his words, yelled a curse, and fled, leaving the suspension order behind. We knew the media war was won. Now we just waited for Mother Nature to confirm. Part 4: Water Rises and the Fall of Achievement. 3 days later, the sky turned ominous. An unexpected severe storm, the combination of the old hammer and moon-phase cyclones, hit. At 10 a.m., a historic rain poured down. Within less than an hour, the village was severely flooded, not knee-deep, but waist-deep. I, having safely stowed my Zim on Old Man Six's mezzanine, rushed to the ancestral hall. Patriarch Lo Lo stood there, his eyes frighteningly calm. "Maidu, Velocity has arrived. Hand me the camera." We immediately launched the 3 tin boats. The Patriarch, however, didn't stick to his initial threat. "I won't just save my clan, my boy," the Patriarch said solemnly. "My true achievement is the lives of my village. I must save everyone." He, along with strong young men, navigated the tin boats through the swift currents. Water was lapping at the first-floor windows of Chief Van's house. I live-streamed the entire rescue operation from the roof of the old community hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Vanshaw Hamlet, the new cultural village. You are watching Patriarch Lo Lo steering a tin rescue boat, evacuating the elderly and children from the low-lying areas. Do you see any official flood control projects working? No, only human kindness and tin boats." I panned the camera to Chief Van's submerged house. "Chief Van, where is your achievement score now?" "I'd like to announce that the Oyster Opera House in Hanoi is flooding, and my Din Bay has become a river. We, the people of Vanshaw, are living with the flood and living practically." The live stream video, shared relentlessly, created a media firestorm. It exposed the bureaucracy of the village council and the contradiction between grand public projects, opera houses, achievement scores, and filthy reality flooding, clogged sewers. 2 days later, when the water receded, Chief Van dared not leave his home. He was disciplined for poor management, false reporting, and faced the contempt of the entire village. The village's achievement status was revoked. The village council, under intense public pressure, had no choice but to approve the tin boat proposal. They even asked the Patriarch and me to supervise the boat purchase and the reconstruction of the community hall into a 2-story flood-resistant structure. Madame Mao, thanks to the massive publicity, sold out all her stale cakes and was hailed as a humanitarian entrepreneur. Benevolence had been profit-optimized. The slander lawsuit against us was immediately dropped. I used the remaining fund money to buy an extra tin boat and kept a small fee for my MC and legal services. Patriarch Lo Lo, witnessing the power of practicality, finally hung up his pen. "My boy," he told me over hot tea at the now-clean ancestral hall. My literature was too naive. I realized that a tin boat and an honest video carry more weight than 1,000 poems. He invested his remaining capital not in Hanoi land, but in a self-funded drainage project for the lowest part of the village. He had found his true literature in infrastructure. As for me, I knew it was time to return to my original craft. I took my newly fixed Zim, its engine roaring, from Old Man Six's shop. I no longer needed to cycle in slow living mode. I needed velocity to make a living. I mounted the scooter, the last piece of water buffalo chew dissolving in my mouth. I knew that the feeling of slow living was only for the affluent. For a man like me, specializing in one skill leads to honor remains the guiding principle. I started the engine, and the Zim's strong roar echoed. I was back to my daily grind, but no longer a mere taxi driver. I was the stir, the man who used humor and speed to change a whole village. I looked toward the horizon, where the 4- and 5-year-olds were cycling on their four-wheelers. I knew their dream of advancement was still there. But now, at least they wouldn't have to worry about being hydro-locked in the next big storm. That, too, is a form of happiness.